What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. We are going to take a look at Diane Abbott's interview on BBC Radio 4's Today programme. They was discussing the government's recent statement that freedom of movement between the UK and the EU will end on October the 31st. Because for some reason, this is a shock to the Labour Party when everyone else knew it was never in doubt that free movement would have to end once Brexit was done. Of course, Abbopotamus has a problem with what the Boris government is doing for some reason, and in true Ramona fashion, contradicts her own position regarding freedom of movement and Brexit. So let's check it out.
We can talk now to Diane Abbott, who is the Shadow Home Secretary and is here in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
If the government sticks to its guns on this, what do you think will happen?
I think it's going to create chaos. It's going to be very problematic for business, but it's also going to be very difficult for EU nationals. There are currently 3 million here altogether. 1 million have registered for settled status. There's no possibility of 2 million registering between now and the 31st of October. And then those EU nationals who are here but haven't registered for settled status will be in the exact same position as the Windrush people. There will be people that came here perfectly legally but will not have the paperwork to prove that and will have all sorts of problems with employers and the NHS and so on.
And even more problems if they leave the country and try to come back in.
Even more problems if they actually leave the country or out of the country. This is typical of everything that Boris is doing around Brexit. He makes grand announcements without thinking through the practicalities and without thinking through what the effect will be on the society and business.
Well, fuck me, Abbopotamus is calling it chaos within 4 words of opening her mouth. She bangs on about this 3 million EU nationals living in the UK and the fact that only 1 million of them have applied for settled status and how the other 2 million now don't have enough time to apply for it. This scheme started at least a year ago and can be completed in 10 minutes using a fucking smartphone app. So anyone who has not done it either can't be bothered to get settled status, does not want to stay here, or does not have the rights to stay here for some reason or another. Her argument that 2 million won't be able to do it is complete nonsense. The Maybot government purposely made it simple to encourage people to do it, or she thought they were all stupid. I am inclined to think Maybot was trying to appease the EU, so it's more likely the first one. Abbopotamus then goes on to claim the people who don't complete a 10-minute application are going to be like the Windrush situation. Fuck off, you dopey spunk trumpet. The Windrush generation was back in a time when identification requirements would have been a lot lower than they are now, since technology has advanced. Anyone here now from the EU that is able to legally live and work here is going to have current identification. The EU is not a third world nation, it's a bunch of European nations with the same technology we have. These people will have driving licence, passport and who knows what else to prove who they are and anything else they will need. The Windrush scandal was down to the fact a lot of these people came here at a time when identification could have been something as pointless as a piece of paper with your name on it, or something like that, among other things, making it hard for them to prove their right to be here. The EU national is not going to have that same trouble, are they? Abbopotamus knows this, so is just gaslighting to make this a bigger deal than it is. If you're not living in the country at the time of Brexit, then you go through the correct immigration procedures to be able to live here like every other nation's citizen the world over. If you went on holiday and returned after Brexit, you would be able to prove this and will have no issues. They might have to deal with immigration in their own country, but that's not our government's control, so Diane, stop talking shit. She finishes up blaming Boris Johnson for everything. It's not Boris Johnson's fault the people voted to leave, and you all agreed to honour that vote. This is the logical outcome of that vote, just 3 years late, so stop fucking moaning. But let's move on to the next clip.
One of the things that the Home Office was talking about yesterday is extra checks on the criminality, at least. And I think to a lot of people, well, that seems sensible enough. If we've left the European Union, we should be able to check whether someone coming in is a criminal or not.
The truth is, one of the problems about leaving the EU without a deal is we will lose access to all the EU databases that the police and the security services have relied on. And we'll lose it on the stroke of the end of the day on October the 2nd.
So you're saying flatly that criminality line that was around yesterday is just false. It can't work.
I don't see how they can check criminality once they've lost access to EU databases, which they will do.
What should happen?
Well, what should happen is what business and EU nationals want, which is more consultation and a longer and more considered transitional process.
Which is what Theresa May had promised. You'd be happy with something that just allowed things to remain essentially the same on November the 1st they were on October the 31st.
You've got to have a transitional process. That's what EU nationals think, and that's what business thinks. Anything else is chaos.
OK, so Diane Abbott has a problem with trying to keep criminals out of our country, which is amazing considering the levels of crime we are currently dealing with, and she blames this on the Tories. I guess that would fit Labour's policies when you think about it. Labour love to spend public money, so if they let more criminals in, they can justify spending billions more on trying to fight it, and blame it on the far right when it all fails. But her bullshit claim we will lose access to the EU police database is absolute nonsense. We are a founding member of Interpol, you disingenuous fuckpig. That is 180 countries' police forces cooperating. The EU has no control over that, and since it's located in France, it will have access to any EU database you're talking about, which will just be Interpol's database, let's be honest. How this idiot can sit there and talk this much shit that is so easy to tear apart is beyond me. Brexit will make no difference to UK police forces being able to access Interpol's database at the end of the day. This is more cow-culling bollocks, plain and simple. The way they can check criminality is by checking Interpol's database among others during the immigration checks that make sure this person is going to benefit the UK when they go through his or her skills or experience, to make sure that he passes the points-based system the government plans to implement. How do you think Australia managed to run a similar system and keep criminals out while not in the European Union? Her plan is instead to delay Brexit and allow more Europeans in for as long as possible. Of course, her saying about businesses wanting this is referring to the businesses that take advantage of low wages mass immigration brings. This is what makes me laugh about Labour MPs these days. They want the wages to go up and increase minimum wage to £10 an hour or some shit, but they push for unrestricted immigration of even the lowest skilled workers from Europe that pushes wages down, due to the laws of supply and demand obviously. If the supply of workers is high, the company can offer lower wages to workers as they always have hundreds waiting in the wings for each job. Take a look at the situation now. Even in London where there's a lot of jobs going, there is always hundreds of people applying for each job. Control immigration and that will drop within a few years, giving people the chance to earn higher wages as their work will be far more valuable to these companies than it currently is. Labour contradicts itself at every turn though, so what can we expect? Let's move on to the next clip.
In the longer term, what now is Labour's policy on freedom of movement?
Oh, our policy on freedom of movement was in our manifesto. When we leave the single market, freedom of movement falls. But it's how you do it. It's how you do it. And the way Boris is doing it is heading to a catastrophe. Will make Windrush look like a minor blip.
He says, and it was indeed in your manifesto, as you quoted, freedom of movement will end when we leave the European Union. Jeremy Corbyn told Andrew Marr in May he was not staunchly against free movement. It would still be on the table for negotiation. Shami Chakrabarti has said some kind of free movement might not end. Are you saying unquestionably that it is still Labour's policy that freedom of movement, and of course it runs both ways, and a lot of young Labour supporters in particular very much like the idea of freedom of movement and being able to go to the European Union, it still ends at the moment under a Labour deal, if there were to be one?
In practice, it's how you do it. And you have to take notice of what business is saying. You have to take notice of what EU nationals themselves are saying. And you have to take notice of the fact that a lot of Labour voters actually do support some sort of freedom of movement.
And taking note of those things, then it might not end.
When we leave the EU, or when we leave the single market, in fact, freedom of movement falls, but it is how you do it.
Well, so hang on, it falls in name, but you're saying actually in practice, with various agreements that you then put into place, it could carry on in practice.
You've got to have a practical process. The process that Boris is suggesting is not a practical process and will cause harm to people. It will cause harm, actually, to British nationals in the EU, because there's no reason to believe there won't be reciprocal measures.
So in those
EU
circumstances,
countries.
you're saying you could envisage deals where, never mind that the manifesto said freedom of movement will end, actually, in effect, in circumstances that you were envisaging, it might not actually end in practice.
I'm grateful to you, Justin, for putting words into my mouth, but I'd rather stick with what I'm saying, which is it's how you do it.
Oh, so you will honour some of what your manifesto said regarding freedom of movement, but you won't honour other parts of it, like actually leaving the EU. That doesn't even make any sense. The Labour Party has announced it is a Remain party now, who wants a second referendum and to campaign for Remain. So how the fuck are you honouring the manifesto, Abbopotamus? The manifesto said Labour would get us out of the EU, now they want to remain. So please, Abbopotamus, tell me, how are you going to stop freedom of movement while remaining in the EU? How are you going to manage that miracle? I would really, really love to know that. If Labour was in power right now, they would revoke Article 50 and keep us in the EU. Of course, honouring their manifesto. What a joke this woman is. She is saying they would keep freedom of movement, but name it something different so they could get away with it like the shitweasels that they are. Of course, that's providing they were forced to deliver Brexit somehow. The BBC host points out, even if she did not directly say it, we all know what she meant at the end of the day. He does seem surprised by this though, but let's be honest, it's Diane Abbott and the Labour Party. They wipe their gonorrhea-infected gammon hangers with democracy like Toe Swinson and the Liberal Femocrats. They was never going to honour the 2016 referendum, let's be honest. If they would have got in power, they would have just reversed it somehow and blamed it on the Tories or the far right. Let's check out the next clip.
Yeah, well, all right. Let's turn on from freedom of movement to the wider question. You heard John McDonnell on the programme yesterday in this slot saying he's very comfortable. He wants to have another referendum, and in that referendum, he will campaign for Remain. And crucially, what he said was he'd campaign for Remain against anything else, including a potential deal that Labour could do. Are you there?
We are. Of course, the party's committed to a referendum now, and Jeremy's made that clear. And if there is a referendum, and if Remain is on the ballot paper, and there's every expectation it will be, I, like John McDonnell, personally will be campaigning for Remain.
Even against a putative Labour deal?
I will be campaigning for Remain. I think that Remain is the best option for the country and for my constituents.
Is the shadow cabinet there now, do you think? I mean, is it a majority now?
John Mack and I are speaking as individuals. We wouldn't dream of saying this is the view of the entire
It kind of does matter, though. To a lot of people listening who want to know what Labour's position is. I mean, it's clear that Jeremy Corbyn isn't there yet. Is the balance of opinion shifting in the shadow cabinet? Is that fair to say?
We're a democratic party, and in the end we will come to a democratic decision.
Yeah, but there's a risk of it being not just democratic but chaotic.
No,
come on the
chaotic.
programme.
You're telling me about chaos. We've just been discussing what
chaos on both
about
sides.
migration.
Yeah, chaos on both sides. Because when you come on the programme and say that is your position, and we know that it isn't Jeremy Corbyn's position, it is perfectly reasonable for a voter to say, given that there may well be an election coming up, well, I don't know what Labour would do. I
think what you have to remember is that what Jeremy has sought to do all along is keep both wings of the party together, and he's successfully done that so far. But I have to say, as someone that represents Remain constituency, and John McDonnell has said, who actually represents the Leave constituency, that in the event of a referendum with Remain on the ballot paper, we will campaign for Remain.
So the host talks about the undemocratic shitweasel John McDonnell, who has openly admitted he wants a second referendum and the Labour Party to campaign for Remain against everything else, meaning no Brexit deal will be good enough for him. He is in the Lib Fems camp when it comes to Brexit. Like Abbopotamus, they don't care about the largest democratic vote in history, they can't accept defeat, and so will collaborate with the EU to stop Brexit. When the host pressed her to confirm the Labour Party's position, she quickly made sure to say these views are her own and not that of the whole shadow cabinet. We have to remember not all of them want to remain, and some of them definitely don't want a second referendum. Others are from Leave constituencies, like John McDonnell for instance, who with any sort of luck should be voted out of his next seat at the upcoming election, since he now wants to ignore their vote in 2016 and the manifesto he was elected on in 2017, so yeah, he has not really listened to his voters, has he? But of course we have to take into consideration maybe he will get 10,000 postal votes and keep his seat. He is a Labour MP after all. They are well known for record postal votes out of the blue, like Peterborough. Abbopotamus is definitely trying to be a comedian though, when she calls the Labour Party democratic. Someone needs to tell her this is BBC Radio 4, not the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She is not here to tell us jokes. She is outraged though when he questions her on the Labour Party's disarray right now regarding remaining in the EU or getting out. How dare this BBC host question her party and its position? The authoritarian Labour Party does not like to be criticised. You will be thrown in the gulag if they get in power now, mate. Abbopotamus even points out towards the end of that clip that John represents a Leave constituency, as I said, and is going to campaign for Remain. Yeah, it really sounds like Labour MPs are democratic, don't it? Voted in on a manifesto to deliver Brexit in an area that voted Leave, and 2 years later decides he doesn't give a fuck what they say and will do what he wants regardless. That's Labour's democracy in 2019, clearly. Let's move on to the next clip.
Is it feasible then that Jeremy Corbyn, and you think back to Harold Wilson, just remains neutral, allows members of the cabinet, as it would be then, because it would be a Labour government having this referendum, to campaign as they see fit and actually maintains a kind of neutrality around it?
I never thought we'd be referencing Harold Wilson as much as we do nowadays. Jeremy wants to have the widest consultation, including with the Labour movement, and to arrive at a position for the Labour Party as a whole.
Do you think he does need to arrive at a position for the Labour Party as a whole? Can he stay to the side of it, or above it, as he might see it? Or has he got to himself be a campaigner, an active campaigner, do you think, for Remain in the referendum when it's held?
Jeremy's the leader of the Labour Party, as Joe Swinson needs to remember, and he can't stay to one side on an issue such as this. But what he can do is try and bring both wings of the Labour movement together.
Yeah, but that's very important. Having made the efforts that you've described to do that, you are saying he is going to have to firmly campaign. And you believe, do you, that he will campaign for Remain in a referendum that he...
I believe that Jeremy will do what he's always done, which is do what he thinks is best for the country and what is best for the Labour movement.
Okay, so in that clip, the host asked Abbopotamus what Commissar would do in the fantasy world where he was the Prime Minister and managed to hold a second referendum. Would the Labour MPs be able to campaign for either side, or would they be forced to back Remain? She thinks Jeremy will do what's best for the country. Now, is she trying to piss in our pockets and tell us it's raining or what? Corbyn does what is best for himself and his ideology. If he wants to do what's best for the country, he would fuck off and take the Labour Party with him. Let's check out the final clip.
But I can't...
what is best for the country and the Labour movement in those circumstances? That the leader of the Labour Party, who would then be Prime Minister, actually chooses a side and campaigns for it? You're saying, are you, that he would have to do that?
I think time spent on this type of speculation is time you're not spending on analyse how wrong Boris is going.
Yeah, come on, just answer me
Brexit.
that question about does Jeremy Corbyn have the option, do you believe, of staying out of this fight, or is he eventually going to have to pick a side and say, yes, I, in this referendum campaign, will support Remain, or indeed support a Labour Leave deal?
The party and the shadow cabinet will have to debate this and arrive at a position. Whatever the position is, Jeremy will follow what the party says. But there's so much going on at the moment. For instance, one of the things we're calling for, having seen the disastrous predictions about what a no-deal Brexit will mean at the weekend, and the government said, oh no, things have moved on. We want the up-to-date analysis of what a no-deal Brexit will mean.
Right, you want all the background papers published?
Yeah, we want all the background papers published, otherwise there is too much uncertainty.
Would you promise as well, when if you get into government, to do the same, to publish background papers as they come to you on all the issues that are before you as a
Come on, there is no more serious issue in my political lifetime than Brexit. And you've seen a whole bunch of papers which revealed at the weekend which had very alarming prospects. It's not unreasonable that on this, the most important of issues, that we should ask...
Ministers get all sorts of advice that contains alarming
They
prospects.
get all sorts of advice, but this is Brexit, the most important political decision of my lifetime. And I think it's not unreasonable, given we've seen one set of predictions, that we see the most up-to-date predictions of what a no-deal Brexit could mean.
Diane Abbott, thank you very much.
So the host is trying to press Abbopotamus on what a Jeremy Corbyn PM would do, but she's not interested in answering in case she gets it wrong and is kicked to the curb by the Commissar. It wouldn't be the first time he's punished someone who went against the Supreme Leader, would it? Instead, she wants to deflect it off to Boris, hoping the BBC will jump on the bandwagon of blaming Boris for everything. But there was something telling in what she said there. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, is going to have to follow what the shadow cabinet decides. I thought the leader of the party would make these decisions, but I guess not. Who is actually in charge of the Labour Party and its position on Brexit? Because it doesn't seem to be Jeremy Corbyn, that's for sure. Abbopotamus then goes on about the Yellowhammer Project Fear bullshit the media pumped out over the weekend, admitting this document is outdated and asking the government to release private, likely secret documents for some reason, because she wants to see them, I guess. You mean, you need some more Project Fear bullshit to spout, as all you Ramonas have is out-of-date shit like Yellow Snow. Sorry, I mean Yellowhammer. A year-old document at least that was crafted by the Remain government led by Theresa the EU appeaser. That document has about as much credibility as the Maybot government does right now, and that is none. Of course, when the host asked her to do the same with secret documents if Labour was in government, she rejects that and claims Brexit is special, so meh, can't do it. The only reason she thinks it's special is because she's still salty that she lost the 2016 referendum vote to the Leave campaign and she now wants to stop it. Brexit is everything and she needs to stop the incoming catastrophe that is leaving the EU. You want the most up-to-date predictions? Ask the EU. They are who you're fucking working for now, you traitorous cunt. Not the people of Britain, that's for sure. So, what can we take from that? Abbopotamus has a problem with Boris Johnson's move to end free movement of people because she would have implemented her own version of immigration. That essentially changes the name, but keeps the parameters the same. It would still be freedom of movement between the UK and the EU SSR, but worded differently, through the sneaky kind of back deals you would expect from Labour. But all of that was a fantasy, as later in the interview she decided to contradict her position on ending free movement by wanting to remain in the EU. Typical Labour MP. Completely full of shit and forgets what they said 5 minutes earlier. Yet more proof these idiots can never be allowed to get into power. That would be actual chaos. Well, I'm going to end the video there, guys. I just want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribe Star members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. By the time this video goes live, I should be at 40,000 subscribers or very close to it, so thank you all for everyone who has subscribed in the last 103 days since I started uploading content. Now don't forget to let me know what you guys think about Abbopotamus's interview in the comment section below as always. Leave a like, subscribe and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.